Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. Let's keep dissecting this, as one of my viewers aptly named it, Treasure Trove of Information in the Q2 earnings call. I feel like Tesla and Elon have really outlined so much of what's happening there. I think the questions are getting better too. You know, aside from people asking when the Cybertruck will be launched. This is now my third video about this call, and we're still only about halfway through it. We left off during Pierre's questions. His next question was about 50% growth, and if it was to continue, how much of Tesla's supply chain is secured or can grow in order to meet these targets, like lithium refining, and what difficulties do they anticipate? How much is secure today, and how fast can they improve it? Pierre asking in the region of about 10 years in the future. Elon then talks about the constraints with lithium. There is plenty of lithium, as it's one of the most common elements on Earth, and each Tesla battery only uses supposedly about 5 kilograms of lithium, so it's not even that much, but it needs to be refined to ultra high purity, battery grade quality lithium hydroxide and lithium carbonate in order to be a high enough quality for EV batteries. But this is quite difficult and requires massive amounts of machinery, which makes it a hard thing to scale. Therefore, the constraint ends up becoming the processes of refining the lithium to reach this quality, which is all happening in China. This is not new information, and in the past, Elon has been vocal about the opportunity for any entrepreneur who wants an exceptional return on investment. And Elon repeats this again, explaining that lithium processing has software-like margins right now. Elon also says it's quite difficult to produce the anode and cathode, and guesses that 2/3 of batteries will be iron phosphate, or iron phosphate with some manganese. Firstly, he said 2/3 of batteries. I assume he means for EVs, not all batteries, as energy storage would be 50% and likely all iron phosphate cathodes. As some quick math will tell us that otherwise, that would mean only 1/6 of EVs will be iron phosphate, which is not very likely. Also, I'd like to point out each time that Elon says iron phosphate, he doesn't say LFP. What's the difference? Well, the L in LFP is lithium. We know it's possible to make iron phosphate cells with sodium, which is even more abundant and possibly easier to refine. I've been making out for some time how great LFP is for all sorts of reasons, but it's not really LFP that I mean per se. It's more the iron cathode. It's just cheaper, easier, and safer to manufacture, and degrades very slowly. It's perfect for energy storage, but it does have that lithium holding it back. The iron is so abundant, it has so much potential, but the scarcity of lithium will hold it back. So I think Tesla's LFP cells, or iron cells, that they end up making in-house may not be lithium-based. If lithium is the constraint to scaling to the extreme, and yes, Elon says that they will get into the lithium refining business if necessary, but reluctantly, they have better things to do, and this doesn't require Tesla-level engineering, i.e. no opportunity cost for Tesla if third parties can expand the refining process. But to the extreme that Tesla is talking, it's possible they may need to bypass lithium. It's beyond my knowledge of chemistry, but perhaps even some of the other alkali metals could one day be used, like potassium. It's these metals that are used because their outer electron is more, perhaps this isn't quite the right scientific term, but more loosely binded than other elements. Therefore, the ions can pass through the electrolyte or electrode at ease. But Elon also says, or a combination of iron phosphate and manganese. Now, I was under the impression that when Elon used to talk about manganese as a cathode, he was referring to a ternary battery, which are batteries that use a combination of 3 of the following: aluminium, nickel, manganese, or cobalt, NMCA. But it sounds like Elon is looking at manganese and iron cathodes. Elon has mentioned in the past that they are looking at manganese cathodes, but I hadn't considered iron phosphate manganese cells. Imagine the additional range Tesla could achieve with manganese in the cathode with iron. Manganese is about as energy dense as nickel. So what if Tesla works with their partners like Panasonic to help them make more 4680 cells, and then work with CATL and BYD to make more Na, Mn, Fe, Po, or NMFP cells? Whether it's sodium or lithium, either way, imagine if they also contain silicon in the anode. Then imagine again if Tesla can introduce silicon into the anode with these NMFP cells. I think we're likely beyond 300 miles of range in a Model Y with those cells. Drew then actually does refer to the cells as LFP rather than just saying iron phosphate. He brings out the point that it's not just about the more abundant materials with iron cathodes, it's also about the refining process is that much simpler and less capital intense. So it's not just scalable on the resource side, but also on the refining side too. Is it possible this means somewhat that the grade of the lithium might not need to be as high a standard as nickel cells? And Elon reiterates again that there is plenty of lithium, it is about the refining. So if it's a lot easier to refine lithium for LFP, and lithium ends up being the constraint of battery growth, then LFP makes more sense again, and hopefully also LFMP when they add manganese in there too to increase the range. He then goes on to say that there is no technological breakthrough required to get to renewable energy. There is no fundamental barrier. It is just a question as to what rate it can be done. Again, what I like to call the bandwidth of the EV supply chain. Elon talks about what concerns we might see in a few years. He says one is the machinery to refine the critical ingredients of lithium-ion cells, being the lithium itself and the cathodes. Hence why Tesla are building a cathode factory in Texas. Tesla are obviously well aware of these future bottlenecks and have been talking to all their suppliers, telling them they need to expand to meet the demand. It is a big job, and if it ends up being the bottleneck, then Tesla will get into the refining or whatever is necessary themselves. They don't want to. It's better having Tesla engineers work on things like dry battery electrode processes. But if they need more lithium, then Tesla isn't going to let that stop them. We have many labels for Tesla, but another one is Tesla is a limiting factor removal company. They want to expand to the extreme. What are the limiting factors that prevent that? Then that's what Tesla has to get into, whether they want to or not. Tesla don't want to get into mining or refining. They want to focus on manufacturing and software. So hopefully more suppliers do open up and expand so Tesla can concentrate more on what's important. And Elon says all stationary storage will be iron phosphate, which is what we would expect due to its life cycle, safety and cost. But after that, Elon says you really just need nickel cells for long-range vehicles and aircraft or high energy dense applications. Nickel just for long range? Now I would infer that Tesla's long range is around 400 miles and above. Therefore, I think that he is suggesting that we should see iron phosphate batteries producing in excess of 300 miles of range, likely from a Model Y. Looking back just a few years ago, that would have been the dream, to achieve that sort of range and energy density at such a low cost. Now I think that that cost per kilowatt hour must be well below $50 for those cells at the cell level, excluding all inflation and price rises to compare relatively with what previous costs per kilowatt hour were. This would end up meaning batteries for EVs could cost just a few $1,000s, and yet possibly capable of in excess of 300 miles of range. Anyway, don't get too excited yet. Like I say, Tesla is a marathon, not a sprint. But the announcement from Tesla that I'm most looking forward to is their iron phosphate battery day presentation. But this may not be for some time, and then they may have to get into production too, and look how long the 4680 cells have taken. Can you imagine how long these iron phosphate cells would take? The reason the 4680s are taking so long is all the dry battery electrode processes. This is revolutionary new technology. It was insanely difficult, but Tesla are just about there now. They won't need to learn how to do it all over again. On top of that, dealing with iron phosphate cells means that cells are simply much safer and thus easier to manufacture. So maybe, knowing Tesla, it actually might not take them anywhere near as long for their LFP cell as it did for their 4680 cell. And it sounds like Elon wants to be selling a lot more iron phosphate cars than nickel cars, so perhaps they will get around to it sooner. I am expecting a different form factor for the iron phosphate cells for energy. My thoughts are that Tesla will use the ideal form factors based on application and chemistry. Energy density is not a big factor when it comes to energy storage, as these batteries are literally stationary, and that will be the all-important cell to finally get Tesla's energy storage business growing, or scaling to the extreme. Drew goes on to say that the limitations aren't going to be an issue in a couple of years. He is referring to more like 10 years out, when the exponential ramping does become extreme. But they're also doing what they can to resolve it now, and looking ahead, like the new cathode factory in Texas, and their own lithium refining. This feels so much more than just an earnings call. I feel like they have outlined the future of the company on this call. They've said it subtly, and I think a lot has been missed by many. I'm still putting it together, but I think by the end of this, I can calculate a fairly good timeline for the rest of the decade, which is what I've been trying to work out, so I can calculate my 2030 price target. Anyway, there's still more to go through on this earnings call. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.